keeping bees alive. So I repeat myself every month because that's the best way to learn. So there's four things that you need to look at when you go into your hive, right? Bees, brood, food, and disease, right? Bees, brood, food, and disease. And there's four things that you have to manage, right? There's four things that you have to manage with your hive. One is hive size to colony size. It's highly relevant. It doesn't get talked enough about. You know, when your bees are growing in size, you're adding boxes. When your bees are shrinking in size, you're taking away boxes, right? If you have not enough boxes and too much bees, what happens? They swarm. If you have too much boxes, not enough bees, what happens? They get small hive beetles and they don't grow well, right? So you're always trying to match your hive size to your colony size. And naturally, this time of year, obviously the queen's slowing down, the colony size is shrinking. But say if you have killed a queen with formic, well, that's going to decrease your colony size for sure. Say if your bees swarm late, that's going to decrease your colony size. Say if you harvested all their honey and they starve for a little bit, that's going to decrease your colony size. So, you know, there's things that you do as a beekeeper that may impact colony size. Now, remember, you can get small hives through the winter. You know, don't think you got to keep big hives to get them to survive winter. A couple of years ago, I learned this when the flood came through. The great flood of 2021 came through our apiary and basically washed all our nukes off their stands down the Delaware River. We hiked to the Delaware River. No, it's a little exaggeration, but you know, every carry Chris put hives on his back and carried him back to the apiary, and you know, but basically these hives ended up in 5-frame nukes because all the brood was killed and all the bees were dead. But there were some that survived. But we had 13 5-frame nuke boxes that winter. 5-frame nuke box, little colonies. 11 of them survived the winter, and it was just matching colony size to hive size. That was the bottom line there. So management question number one, more than likely your hive size is too big, honestly, right now, potentially. You want to always recognize queenless colonies early, right? Because if you go queenless for too long, you're going to end up with a non-functional hive. Right now, hopefully, most of our hives are queen right? Because if they're not queen right, it's getting late in the season not to be queen right. And we'll talk about that in a second. Feed when needed. You always want to assess how much food is on a colony. You generally want to leave, you always want to have about 30, on a full-size colony, this is not a nuke, but a full-size colony, you always want about 30 pounds of resources on that colony. You know, it's going to rain, the weather's going to change. You know, you don't want to run your colonies. I don't want to run my colonies super light. You know, so 30 pounds is not much. Just heft the back of the hive if you're at 30, if you feel like you're at 40 or 50 pounds because the boxes and the frames weigh some. If you're at 40 or 50 pounds on a full-size colony, you're fine. If you're not at 40 or 50 pounds, you may want to throw a feeder in there and give them some extra. And know your mite count and treat effectively. You know, this came up. This is you know, I'm not going to go into mite treatment, but it is the middle of August. And you should have done one of two things by now, right? Either you should have done a mite test and know your mite levels are okay, or you should have treated empirically. You know, I'm not going to go into like who's right on that and whatever, but generally you should have done one of those two things by now. If you hadn't done one of those two things by now, you're playing a little Russian roulette a little bit. You know, I mean, you may get lucky, your bees may have swarmed, and you may have a hygienic queen, and your mite count may be 1. But it's also your bees didn't swarm, they have no hygienic behavior, your neighbor down the street has high mites, and your mite count could be 20 or 10 or 20. And what happens generally to a hive in August with a mite count of 20? It's dead in October, right? So if you haven't tested or treated, this is a perfect week, right? Because the weather's cool. You could get into your hive. You don't have to sweat. All the treatments work right now. Think about it. Management considerations. Okay, so I know I've went over my 10 minutes. But management. So behavior, right? Beekeeper behavior. I was at EAS. I know I'm divergent. I was at EAS this week. Some people appreciate the context. Most people don't. But I was at EAS this week vendoring, and it was kind of slow at EAS. The people are there not to buy at the end of the season. We've all spent enough money on bee crap. So most of the people are there to attend the conference. But it got me thinking. I was like, I got talking to people, and I was like, and I had this enlightenment. Like, what determines a beekeeping behavior, right? Or beekeeper management? Two things, right? It's their perspective, how they look at things. We all have different perspectives on our beekeeping. Who's right, who's wrong? I mean, nobody, honestly. It's just your own perspective on your beekeeping. And that's going to influence what you do, right? Whether or not, I'm not going to go into all their perspectives because you don't want to hear them, but think about it. If we all ask about our perspectives, it's all different, right? So perspective is one. Oh my goodness, I forgot the other one. Um, oh, I got it. It's not on the teleprompter. I need it on the teleprompter, Mark. Why did I ask me to do this? So perspective is one, and then your desired outcome is the second, right? So what do you want to get at the end of the day, right? And we all want different things out of our beekeeping, right? So some of us want to just watch our bees fly, and some of us want to learn more about bees, and some of us don't want to learn more about bees, but want to make thousands of pounds of honey, and some people want to make money and make nukes and show your friends. I mean, so what your desired outcome is all over the place, and that goes for everybody in this room, right? So perspective plus outcome equals behavior, right? And therefore, who's right? Nobody, honestly, because we all have different perspectives and different outcomes. So with that said, we all have to do management. What am I doing? I'm decreasing my hive size to overwintering. You should be asking yourself, what configuration am I going to go overwinter in? What do I want my hive to be over? Do I want them in a single deep? Do I want them in two deeps? Do I want them in three mediums? Do I want them in two mediums? Do I want them in two deeps and a medium? Again, it's all perspective. Could you overwinter bees with all those configurations? Absolutely. But you need to commit to what configuration you want to get in, and you should start in August trying to get there. If you're far from there, get to where you need to be. Consider combining if not queen right. I mean, this is a tough time if you're not queen right. If you're not queen right, you're losing bees because you've lost brood. Your population size is going down. You've got to build a certain population size up to make it through winter. I would be really hesitant to buy a queen and put it in sort of a weak hive and expect that hive to get through the winter at this point. So just as a consideration, you may want to combine a newspaper combine. Now, if it's your only hive and you have nothing to combine it with, I don't know. One-to-one feed.
Question for you on the combine. If I've got a weak hive that I want to combine with a strong hive, how do I do that?
How do you do that? I don't know, because I'm not. No, honestly, I'm not going to make it up because I shake weak hives. So weak hives just get shaken and they get done for me. But I have too many hives, right? So I can do that. I can make that decision. That's a weak hive, and I make an assessment. It's a weak hive. It may be sick. It may be whatever. I just shake the bees and just move on. But if I was to do it, I would take my strong hive, put it on the bottom, put a piece of newspaper, and then put my weak hive above it, I think. But that's what I would do.
So would you leave both queens in?
No, I would pinch the weak queen, but if I'm queenless, I don't really need to worry about it. Okay. We talked about feeding. If your hive should have 30 or 40 pounds, and we talked about mite checks or mite management. So that's my August management consideration. Beekeeping behaviors. Again, everyone's perspective and everyone's outcomes are different. So I'm not going to tell you right or wrong what you're doing. Can I take 2 questions on August management? Anyone have questions on their August management? Yes, Howard. So how do you tell if she's queenless or just shut down? Well, you could sort of look at you could look at temperament of your hive. So when you go into your hive, you can get a sense of, are my bees calm and sort of normal appearing, or are they runny and loud, right? Runny and loud bees are more likely queenless. If you go in there, everyone's calm and content, it's mainly queen, right? you can look at, well, what kind of brood, do I have any kind of brood in there, right? Shutting down usually means slowing down and not shutting down completely. So, do I have any older larvae? Do I have any cap brood? Is my cappings on the brood light, meaning that the cap's been recently, or are they darker or later? So that can give you a sense. Um, um, Yeah, do they have the nest sort of in the center, looking like the queen's ready to lay? Um, I'm willing to. Any other thoughts on that, Paul? Look for pollen. Right. Do you have food in the hive? Right. If you have no food in the hive, that's one of the things that you have to assess. If no food, no pollen. Pollen. Sure. I feel like I don't feel like any of my hives go broodless in the summer, honestly. Like if I look hard enough, I can find some eggs and larvae in there. But yeah, no, that's a good question, Howard. If in doubt, if you have multiple hives, right, just stick a frame of open larvae from one hive into that hive and come back in 3 days and see if there's emergency queen cells being made. Uh, the other thing that you can't do this time of year, but earlier in the season, someone taught me just throw a frame of foundation in a hive. If you throw a frame of foundation in the hive and 3 or 4 days later it's drawn out, they have a queen. If it's not drawn out, they probably don't have a queen. So a little trick that is worth thinking about. But 85% of the 85% of the time, a queenless hive will fix itself, right? So if you wait, it usually fixes itself. It's the 15% of the time that we all worry about, like what's going to happen if I don't, if it's going to be that 15% of the time, but it's a minority for sure. I You have to ask yourself, why is the hive weak too? I shake them out because I think they're weak because they're sick or something. Honestly, So for me, I'm like, it's not worth combining. I just shake it out, and if it's the bees will just sort of distribute themselves, and I, it'll be sort of a lost thought. So I just shake out weak hive. I acknowledge that. I acknowledge that. And there's no reason if you have a weak hive or a hive, throw some feed in it. If you throw 1-to-1 in it, it'll probably in a pollen patty or it'll probably start to lay if you give it some food. And pretend there's a nectar flow on with some 1-to-1. You can get your hive to lay. Yes, Monica.
Is there a way to read that peanut shell, which is the queen cell? There's a hole on the top, hole in the middle, hole at the bottom. Are those all, that tells a story, right? Because I was making up some baloney to some kids. And I said, well, if it's open at the bottom, they're gonna charge it. If there's a hole in the center, another queen emerged and already killed her and
Right.
her out. And then the one at the top is that queen actually made it, got out. Is this all baloney?
If there's a hole at the top, oh, okay. So a queen cell is capped on day 8, right? So they'll overly feed it royal jelly. The queen cell will be capped on day 8, and queen cells emerge on day 16, and worker brood emerges on day 21. So if you see a queen cell, you should never see a queen cell that has no brood around it. Cap brood, because that's a dud. That's dead, right? Because the queen cell should have emerged before all the other brood around it, because it emerges on day 16. So if you look at a frame and you see a queen cell by itself that's capped, it's a non-viable cell. That's not going to fix your problem. Don't rely on that cell to fix your problem. And so queen cells emerge on day 16, right? So when they emerge, they basically create a trap door at the bottom of the cell, right? So if you look at the queen cell, there's a little potentially flap that the queen chews around, opens it up, and she comes out. If the queen cell still has the cap on the bottom, yet has a hole on the side, that means you have another queen running around in there. So and that usually will happen more in an emergency situation where the first queen out usually is the winner, and she goes around and sort of stings or opens up that other queen cell a little bit, and that's the trigger for all the other workers to come and destroy that cell. So yeah, queen cells that are sort of chewed at the side, or that means there's another virgin queen running around in there somewhere. Yeah, no, it's just close is good enough. And who knows? Maybe you're right. You know, we have a lot to learn. Anyway, any other questions on August management? How many mating flights does a queen go on? 5. I average 5 mating flights. The mating flight is on average 15 minutes. So I should at least get 15 minutes because my segment of the talk should be at least as long as a queen mating flight.